Welcome to part 2 in my series on what is this old diesel worth. In the first video you got to check out the whole cosmetic condition of the car, but we really didn't get into the mechanical condition because I couldn't get the engine running. So I've got my trusty booster out here. We're going to fire this thing up. I know this probably hasn't run in at least a year, so I'm not going to just start it up and run it. I do want to check all the fluids. We'll check coolant here. One of the things you want to do is check for oil in the coolant. I've seen this quite a bit on these old diesels, but this is pretty clean. And that looks like it has the correct yellow coolant in it. The cap, of course, will need to be replaced, but coolant looks okay. Let's check engine oil. Usually you find these low. People don't keep up on adding oil in these old diesels because they do tend to burn oil. Look at that. It's black, but it's not that dirty, but it's right up to full. That's a good sign. And I'm going to take a quick look at the power steering fluid. We're going to get both hands on it. Okay, there we go. Ah, look at that. Nice and full and pretty clean. Look at that. Sometimes you pull this off and it's like black in here. It's so dirty, it's never been changed in years. So that's an excellent sign right there. All right, now I think we can get inside. Cross our fingers. Will this baby fire up? I don't know how old the fuel is, but shouldn't be too bad because it's run within a year or so. Let's see how quickly it starts. Wow. Now, for those of you not familiar with these old diesels, you may think, wow, that's kind of noisy. But that's a very healthy noise in an OM 617 turbo diesel engine. Let's bring it off idle. Look at how smooth that is. Look at the air cleaner housing, not even hardly moving. Because we don't know how old the fuel is in that tank, the real test is to hook this up to my emergency fuel tank and run brand new fuel directly in it. But this sounds pretty good to me. Before we take this out on the road, I'm going to pull it in on the lift and we're going to give it a quick underneath inspection for brakes, driveline, and so on. I decided before taking this car out on a road test, I would give it a quick inspection. Probably a good thing I did, because I said, okay, let's pull the tires, inspect the brakes, but look at this. This is the indicator. We drove this in here. Of course, we used the brakes, but we have a severe, we're talking severe dragging brake on this right rear side. You do not want to drive these cars if the brakes are dragging. So we're going to pull all four wheels off. Before we ever get this out on the road, we're going to make sure that when you hit the pedal and release the pedal, the tires spin freely. I'm going to have to get this caliper unstuck here so I can test drive this. I think probably 80 to 90% of you agreed that this car isn't worth fixing, but it does have some value with parts. So I'm going to do this inspection real quick, get this fixed so it's safe to get out on the road to drive, and then I can determine primarily the condition of the engine under power and the transmission shift points, okay? But I thought I'd show you a couple other things. This is kind of interesting. You basically look at this car and you say, oh yeah, it's rust-free. Well, not necessarily so. I want to show you some evidence of my suspicion that this car has been subject to road salt. I want you to look closely at this rust bubble here. This is a very good indicator of road salt corrosion because of what's going on underneath the paint. Far away from the original rust spot, you get moisture with salt, under the paint, and it'll start eating away over a long period of time and creating these bubbles. So when you see this on a car, you can pretty much be assumed this is not the only rust you're going to find. So now I get to prove my point. I mentioned in part 1 that I saw some rust under the fender right in this area. And this is actually not sheet metal. This is body undercoating lifting up. You've heard me harp on this problem with body undercoating. It doesn't really protect the car if the car has been driven with salted roads, because your moisture with salt works its way in here. It just keeps growing and growing and growing. There you go. That's what you find. And you don't usually find this kind of rust in areas like the Pacific Northwest where it just gets a lot of rain. I'm not saying it won't happen, but this is the indicator right here, and I bet if I go around the rest of this car and poke, we're going to find more of this type of corrosion. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to get this rear brake freed up, and we're going to get this out on the road, but I want to check underneath the car. I'll take you along with my camera as we just give it a quick underbody inspection. I won't even talk. I'll just show you the images, and you can leave the comments. Looking around the engine compartment here, there is one thing that I want to change before I take this out on a road test. Look at this repair on the main vacuum line. I noticed the shutoff was not working when I used the key, so I thought, oh, there's a vacuum leak. Fortunately, I have another hose here from a 300SD, so I'm going to install this. Because if I just leave this like that, I bet you there's a pretty good chance I'm not getting full braking. I'll have a vacuum not getting to the booster. So for me, this is a must fix. Well, I've completed the underbody inspection, and I'm going to let you make some comments about that. I think it obviously looks good enough to take this out for a road test, and I freed up this rear caliper. So we don't have a problem there. We're going to lower the car down a little bit, and I'm going to show you what I've done up in the engine compartment. All right, we've got this vacuum line replaced. Some of you may be wondering, why did I bother even doing that? Well, there's a couple things. One, I want to make sure I get the booster working while I drive it. But the main thing is I want to make sure the transmission's shifting properly. If I'm going to make a judgment call on the transmission, I'm going to have to make sure that all this vacuum system is hooked up properly and there are no leaks. Look, I found another vacuum Y that had a tear in it, and that was leaking also. So you have problems with your vacuum system, go out on the road, the transmission isn't going to shift right, it's going to flare, it's going to jerk, and you may be fooled thinking the transmission's bad when really it's the vacuum system. So I want to make sure that's right. And then over here, you can see I've installed what we call our purge or emergency fuel tank that you can hook up to these old diesels. Now the engine is going to be running directly off this tank. The reason I'm bypassing the main tank is I don't have any idea of the condition of the fuel. You can get bad fuel and they can make these engines run terrible. Old fuel, I've had fuel mixed with gasoline. I've even had a car that I bought where the owner was told they needed a rebuild engine because it had gasoline in the fuel and would hardly run at all. So we're going to run it directly from this tank on clean diesel. And there's one more thing I want to show you. When I was hooking up this tank, I looked at the pre-filter and it was totally plugged up. So you're going to go out and test drive one of these diesels with a plugged up pre-filter or bad fuel in the tank, you're not going to get true indications of the health of your engine. So we replaced the pre-filter. Now what I'm going to do is, I've got Jerson in the car, he's going to start it. We're going to make sure the shutoff's working, and he's going to go ahead and glow it and run it just for a few minutes and then shut it off. Whoa! Did you see how fast that started? There's hardly even one revolution, and the engine's cold, and look at how smooth it's running at idle. All right, let's try shutting it off. Wow. Did you see how quickly it shut off? Bang! It just one or two rocks shook the whole car. That is an indication of very high compression. Oh yes, we'll just let it warm up here on the ramp a little bit. Let's check the smoke. Oh, look at that. Not even a wisp of smoke. Almost like a gas engine here. One of the reasons I let it sit here and run for a while on the ramp is we want to make sure the temperature gauge is working and the oil pressure is good. You hardly ever see a tach work. What's the matter, Jerson? You can't get that seatbelt on?
No.
Where is it? The latch is broken. You know, the door check strap is broken, so I gotta be careful. Ouch, gonna get my leg. Ow. Now this is a lovely thing indeed here, playing around with these buttons. I set the wheel down, finally got the fan to blow, and look at this. We got cold air coming in here. How do you explain that? All right, we're gonna cruise along here. A couple things we're after in this test drive is we're gonna be looking at power and of course the shifting points of the transmission and how smoothly it shifts. But before I do that, I'm going to do a little quick test of the transmission. So let's see how fast it goes into reverse, engages. Okay, drive, right away, right away. Okay, if it's a long delay, that can show your transmission is worn, so that's a good sign. Okay, now I'm gonna not get on it real hard here because this baby hasn't run in a while. Now the transmission is shifting with a jerk. That's good. Now you're going to say, well, Kent, why is that good? Well, it's good because probably not getting enough vacuum. And if it's slipping, that's bad. Usually if it's jerking, you can fix it with vacuum. All right, now we're coming up to temperature. I think I'll go ahead and we'll get on it here and see what it does. Whoa, look at that. We're already up to 55 miles an hour. And this baby is fast. And it's also smooth. Okay. Nice shift. Nice shift. Okay. All right, I'm going to roll this thing back to the shop. This is going to be the conclusion of part 2 in this series. If any of you want to make a revision on what you think this car is worth, please leave your comment. But I would appreciate it if you tell me what your previous offer would have been and whether it's gone up or down in light of what we've just looked at in this video. Okay, I'm back in the shop. I know the steering wheel is worn, but look, there's hardly any vibration. This is one of the smoothest diesels I've been around.